A man once turned his own trophy down. When the PDC created a tournament in his honor, Jockey Wilson refused to show up, refused to even open the door for the old friends who came looking for him. By then, he was living alone in a one-bedroom council flat on benefits, and within a few years he'd be dead. He is one of 8 darts world champions in this video who went from lifting trophies in front of millions of people to losing their homes, their careers, or their lives entirely. And by the end, you'll know exactly what happened to each of them, including the one who was left so broke he had to drink rusty water out of a hotel radiator just to make a meal. A lot of videos on this topic throw around the word homeless, and we're not going to do that because we can't back it up. What we can back up is worse in some ways. Men who won world championships in front of millions of viewers and then spent their final years in poverty, on benefits, or standing in bankruptcy court. That's the story we're telling. Darts didn't always mean money, and Leighton Rees is proof of that. A former lorry driver and sheet metal worker from Wales, Rees became the sport's first ever world professional champion in January of 1978, beating John Lowe for a prize of £3,000. Compare that to today, where the World Championship winner takes home £1 million and you're looking at roughly 330 times more money for the exact same title. Rees played through the era before darts, money exploded, and by the time the boom of the 1980s arrived, his best years as a competitor were already behind him. A pacemaker fitted around 1998 ended any hope of a comeback. And 3 years after that, in 2001, at Pontypridd County Court, the man who started professional darts filed for bankruptcy at 61 years old. 2 years later, in June of 2003, he was dead at 63, liver failure taking him under. The first world champion darts ever had spent his final years bankrupt. If one story defines this whole video, it's Jockey Wilson's. A former coal haulier and fish gutter from Kirkcaldy, who left school at 14, Wilson became Scotland's first darts world champion, and he did it twice. The first win came in 1982 against John Lowe for £6,500, and the second came in 1989 against Eric Bristow for £20,000, watched by around 8 million people on UK television. He was 38, the oldest champion of his era, and at his peak in the 80s he was pulling in around £60,000 a year. Then diabetes showed up in the late 80s, and that's when things started coming apart. Wilson's entire game had been built around a pre-match ritual of lager and vodka, and when doctors forced him onto water instead, his accuracy fell apart with it. Around the same time, a costly legal fight with his first manager and a growing unpaid tax bill finished draining what he had left. On December 23, 1995, Wilson quietly walked away from professional darts. No announcement, no farewell tour, just a bus ride back to Kirkcaldy and silence. Bankruptcy followed 2 years later in 1997. For the next 16 years, home was a one-bedroom council flat on Melrose Crescent, the same estate he'd grown up on, paid for by disability benefits. Overweight, diabetic, depressed and agoraphobic, he turned away his old rivals Eric Bristow and Bobby George when they came to check on him. The PDC named a tournament after him in 2009, the Jockey Wilson Cup, and he refused to go. His own words at the time, "I've been let down once or twice in my life, but I don't want anyone feeling sorry for me. There's only one person to blame for the situation I'm in, and that's me." March 24th, 2012. That's when Jockey Wilson died, at 62 years old. Not every story here ends in death, and Mervyn King is proof some of these men are still out there fighting to fix what went wrong. King's resume is genuinely elite. BDO World Masters Champion in 2004, a 2-time BDO World Championship runner-up, PDC Newcomer of the Year in 2007, 7 PDC major finals, and 16 straight appearances at the PDC World Championship, adding up to more than £2 million in career prize money. And yet, the High Court of Justice in London declared Mervyn King bankrupt, with more than £500,000 owed to HMRC in unpaid taxes. The root of it, by King's own account, was simple ignorance about how taxable prize money actually works. His words, "I hid my head in the sand. You think the gravy train will last forever and it doesn't. I was quite naive when it came to tax. I actually thought with it being winnings, I didn't have to pay tax on it." During the COVID lockdown, with his tour card gone and his income dried up, King drove for Amazon, delivering packages while a construction business he'd started barred him from acting as director. He said he feared losing his home and his 3 dogs during that stretch. But here's where his story splits from Wilson's and Rees's. In January 2026, Mervyn King fought his way back onto tour through Q School. breaking down in tears the moment he qualified. A first-round finish at the 2026 World Championship brought in £15,000, every bit of it going straight toward the debt he's still chipping away at. His advice to other players now: don't do what I did, don't hide your head in the sand. This isn't just something that happened to players from dart's poorer, older era. Rob Cross won the PDC World Championship in 2018 on his debut, beating Phil Taylor 7-2 in what turned out to be Taylor's last professional match for a prize of £400,000. Since then, Cross has added a European Championship, a World Match Play title, and a World Championship semi-final appearance as recently as 2024. His own limited company, Rob Cross Darts Limited, pulled in more than £1 million in tournament earnings between March 2020 and November 2023, with sponsorship and management income stacked on top of that. And none of it changed the fact that the company paid HMRC only a fraction of what it owed. Liquidation came in November 2023, and the total liabilities on the books read £579,805. Full personal bankruptcy was avoided through an IVA, an individual voluntary arrangement to repay the debt over time, but the consequences still landed. In June 2025, the UK Insolvency Service banned Cross from acting as a company director for 5 years, running until 2030. Cross hasn't dodged the subject. "It's not my proudest moment of my life," he said. "I've done wrong, and I hold my hands up to it. Going down this route with the IVA means I'm not running. I'm going to correct them." He's still competing at the top of the sport, having won the Dutch Masters in January 2025, paying off what he owes out of future prize money as he goes. Known to fans as the Count for his Dracula Cape walk-on, Ted Hankey won the BDO World Championship twice, in 2000 and again in 2009. His 2000 final against Ronnie Baxter took just 46 minutes and finished on a 170 checkout, still the shortest world final ever played. Health problems started the slide. A stroke during a match at the 2012 Grand Slam of Darts, combined with long-term diabetes, wrecked his form and his ranking collapsed all the way to 94th in the world. He lost his PDC Tour card at the end of 2013, and bankruptcy followed not long after. HMRC left unpaid as repeated attempts to qualify back onto tour kept failing. None of that compares to what came next. In May of 2022, Hankey pleaded guilty at Warrington Crown Court to sexually assaulting a teenage woman. The incident caught on CCTV, and the judge called it a disgraceful act. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and placed on the sex offenders register for 10 years. His wife filed for divorce, his children cut ties, and every sponsor he had walked away. 2 world championships, and it ended in a prison cell. Nicknamed the Viking, Andy Fordham won the BDO World Championship in 2004. Beating Mervyn King for a £50,000 prize while weighing around 31 stone at his heaviest. He and his wife Jenny ran a pub in southeast London called the Rose, and by his own estimate, alcohol cost him several £100,000 over the course of his career. Months after winning the world title, Fordham collapsed live on air during a match against Phil Taylor at the Circus Tavern in November 2004. His liver by then functioning at only about 25% capacity. He collapsed again at Lakeside in January 2007, and doctors drained 18 litres of fluid from his body before putting him on the emergency liver transplant list. Around 2008, he was reported to be on the verge of bankruptcy, and the pub he and Jenny had built together was gone. £266. That's how much weight Fordham eventually lost appearing on the ITV show Celebrity Fit Club. Of his own world title, he once said, "It was one of the worst things that could have happened to me," and of Jenny, "If she had not been as strong as she's been, I wouldn't be here now." Andy Fordham died on July 15, 2021, at 59 years old from organ failure, Jenny at his side. Few players in darts history dominated like Eric Bristow, the crafty Cockney. 5-time BDO World Champion, 5-time World Masters Champion, World #1 a record 5 times, and an MBE to go with it. Bristow even bankrolled a young Phil Taylor's career with around £10,000 of his own money, helping build the 16-time world champion darts fans know today. Dartitis is what ended Bristow's dominance, a condition that first hit him at the 1986 Swedish Open and never fully released its grip. He never won another major after January of 1986. What followed instead was 2 decades as a Sky Sports pundit, a second career that lasted right up until November 2016, when a series of tweets telling footballer sexual abuse survivors they should have sorted that poof out got him sacked by Sky within about 24 hours. Every other broadcaster dropped him just as fast. Bristow summed up his own finances better than anyone else could. "I've earned millions, but spent millions," and in a line that's stuck around darts ever since. There's not much point being the richest man in the graveyard. A heart attack took him on April 5th, 2018 at 60 years old, while he was working a Premier League darts event at the Echo Arena in Liverpool. The PDC later renamed the Grand Slam of Darts trophy in his honour the Eric Bristow Trophy. The Prince of Wales, Richie Burnett, won the BDO World Championship in 1995 on his debut at just 27, beating Raymond van Barneveld, and went on to reach a PDC World Match Play final in 2001 while ranked world number 1. Everything changed in November 2014 when Burnett failed a PDC drugs test for cocaine, resulting in an 18-month ban confirmed the following year. What came next was, in his own words, the worst period of his life, one where he admits he was constantly thinking about suicide. Alone and broke in a Wagon hotel room with no kettle, at his absolute lowest point, he made himself a pot noodle using rusty brown water drained straight from the room's radiator. "I've earned 2 fortunes and spent 3, is how Burnett sums up his own finances. But unlike several of the men in this video, that hotel room wasn't the end of his story. He clawed his way back onto tour in 2017, then again in January 2022 at age 54, playing for a damaged knee, and by 2023, he'd reached the UK Open quarterfinals, beating Peter Wright along the way. Speaking at the World Seniors event, 58 years old and still competing, his message was blunt: "I want to win because I'm skint. I need to win." None of this is 8 isolated cases of bad luck. It's a structural problem baked into professional darts itself. £43,000 a year. That's the average prize money across the roughly 159 registered PDC professionals. According to darts pundit Paul Nicholson, speaking to Sporting Life, outside the top 10 players, that number drops to around £28,000, below the UK national average wage, and even a headline win of £60,000 shrinks fast once the PDPA levy, management fees and tax take their cut, leaving a player with roughly £22,000 in hand, about a third of what the trophy check suggested. Nicholson didn't hold back on the pension question either. "If you pulled every tour card holder and asked them if they pay into a pension scheme, I'd be surprised if as many as 10 of them said yes. These are self-employed men with no sick pay, no employer pension, and, as Mervyn King's own story shows, often no real understanding that the money they're winning gets taxed at all. Reaching the very top doesn't guarantee stability either." When Wayne Warren won the BDO World Championship in January 2020, becoming, at 57, the oldest world darts champion in history, his winner's check came to just £23,000, the lowest since Jockey Wilson's £20,000 back in 1989. 8 months later, the BDO itself collapsed into liquidation, £468,000 in the red, wiping out the exhibition circuit that plenty of VE retired champions had leaned on for extra income. Homeless darts legends. The evidence doesn't actually support that. What it supports instead is arguably more sobering. Multiple world champions, men who once played in front of millions, ending up bankrupt, in council housing, in prison, or dead before their time, because professional darts, for most of its history, offered no pension, no financial education, and no safety net once the trophy stopped coming. Leighton Rees started it all and died bankrupt. Jockey Wilson won it twice and died in a council flat on benefits. Andy Fordham and Eric Bristow are gone far too soon. Mervyn King, Rob Cross and Richie Burnett are still out there, still fighting, still paying off what they owe. And Ted Hankey's story is a reminder that not every downfall is really about money at all. These are the real stories behind the trophies, and not homelessness, but something just as important for anyone who loves this sport to understand.